What's up, Bikerumor fans? I'm here in Akureyri, Iceland with the all-new Lauf Elja, which, as we've come to call it affectionately over the past few days of riding, the hell yeah. This is the new single pivot mountain bike from them, their first mountain bike. So let's take a look at the tech details and how this thing rides.
The Elja may look like a simple single pivot design, and to be totally honest, when they first unveiled it, there were a few seconds of silence as we all took it in. I think we all expected a short travel, flex stay, XC softail. What we got was so much better. Lauf says every good suspension design is basically trying to get the center of rotation, or main pivot location, somewhere just in front of the top of the chainring. So rather than complicate things with a bunch of linkages and pivots and bearings, they just gave it a very robust single pivot design with 120 millimeters of rear travel. But there are some clever design features that make this stand out. For starters, it's pivoting on a 29mm dub-sized spindle, which let them use a dub bottom bracket as their pivot bearings. Simple, reliable, and easy to source and service. That also gave it a massively wide stance, so there's very little lateral or torsional flex in the frame. But as with any full suspension bike, there will be some, so they drive the shock with thin carbon fiber fingers that can flex laterally with the swing arm while still driving the shock straight forward, eliminating any binding or stress on the shock. There's no internal frame storage, partly because this design doesn't really leave much room for it, but mostly because Lauf didn't want to add the weight or compromise strength to put a giant hole in the down tube. The pivot location gives the rear axle a slightly rearward start and then a mostly vertical path. There's minimal chain kickback, and braking had no noticeable impact on suspension performance, as you'll soon see. The ultra-wide bearing stance also gave them room to fit massive 29 by 3.0 tires. Yes, this is a World Cup level XC race bike that fits 3-inch tires. They're speccing it with new Goodyear Peak 29 by 2.6 tires, which are light, fast rolling, and thanks to the extra width, have tons of traction. But I also rode it with 29 by 3 WTB Rangers through some mud, and there was still plenty of clearance. It was also really freaking fun, but more on that later. Lauf sticks with their standard modulus carbon fibers to make the frame tougher, but it's still light. Claimed frame weight for size medium painted is just 1920 grams, and even with the bigger tires, the bike feels really light. If that rear swing arm looks big, it's because it is. So is the down tube and the head tube junction. Basically, it's a thick, tough bike that's also lightweight, which is a tough combo to pull it off, but Lauf did it. The design still allows for 2 bottles inside the front triangle, albeit small ones, and there's a third bottle cage mount on the bottom if you want. All bikes will come with wireless drivetrains and dropper posts. Several top specs on both trail and XC builds come with RockShox flight attendant too, and for surprisingly low prices. Lauf specs their own new 780mm wide riser bar, which weighs just 200 grams. And they spec their damped headset bearings, which help them keep the front wheel stable without adding complex springs or hardware. It's basically just thicker seals and grease. Simple and brilliant. We spent 2 days riding the Elja on a mix of 4 single track and bike park trails, with a perfect blend of flow and tech, climbs and descents. Then, I headed into the backcountry with some friends for a 3rd day of adventure riding and hike-a-bikes. If you just want the short of it, the unanimous conclusion is that everyone really loved how the Elja rode, myself included. As with their gravel bikes and forks, it's obvious that the Lauf was made for Iceland's mix of rugged landscape and gravel backroads ripe for exploration. We tested them in the northern town of Akureyri, where the single track is amazing and the weather was surprisingly cooperative. Before we get into the fun stuff, let's talk about climbing. Put simply, the Elja climbs like a goat, or Icelandic sheep. Complete bikes come with a mix of standard and flight attendant equipped shocks. There's no cable routing for a cable actuated lockout, so without a wireless lockout or flipping a switch on the shock itself, you will have a tiny bit of suspension bob under normal pedaling, but I didn't feel like it robbed any real power. Racers will prefer it locked out. I liked it either way. Lauf didn't make a big spiel about anti-squat or anti-rise, but I'll say this. The bike digs in on the climbs, keeping traction whether seated or standing. Even over these routes, you can see how the rear tire just stays planted to the ground. One thing about the bike's wide stays is that our heels were very close to them. If you ride heels in, this might not be the bike for you. I tapped my ankle or heel on it a few times, Not enough to be an issue, but it's something to be aware of. The bike hammers when you need it to, but most of our riding is more like this, pedaling, flowing, and just having fun, and it excels at that too. The geometry is spot on, and the rider position is well balanced over the wheels. A low standover height makes it really easy to whip this bike around tight, swoopy single track. This is me trying to keep up with Jordan so I can stay in frame, which meant a lot of standing and pedaling, and I'll restate that this bike pedals great. The stiff frame also makes it easy and predictable to control, even when the ground is a little slippy slidey. One of the challenges of riding a new bike in a new place is that there's always a learning curve. With the Elja, it was short and shallow. We were both comfortable on the bike after just a few miles. At the bike park, Jordan stayed on the XC build with the 120mm SID fork. I switched to a trail build with fatter tires and a 130mm pike. Honestly, the bike is incredibly capable in both trims, but as the riding transitioned from flow trails and smooth berms to lava rock and chunky backcountry, I was happy to have the extra cushion. Which, to me, is one of the big selling points of this bike. Swap forks and tires and you go from an XC race bike to a lightweight trail bike with the same frame and components. They even run the same 180mm brake rotors, although you could upsize those a bit if you wanted. I never felt the need for more stopping power, but the option is there. The rear tire also stays planted on the descents, even under hard braking. All of it comes together in a bike that's easy to maneuver at high and low speeds, which adds confidence over technical trail features. Whether your local trails are groomed and smooth like this, or rugged or remote like most of Iceland, or rides often turn into adventures and misadventures with friends, with the inevitable ice melt stream crossing that somehow becomes a part of every ride here. There's something to be said for a bike that can do it all well. As for the looks, there's no denying the Elja has some old school vibes, but I'm being totally honest when I say, it's Luke's screw on me, and I want one.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you like this video, click like, click subscribe, and check out the full review with more pictures and details on bikerumor.com.
Come on!